First encounter on Deep Space Station. 7. Ryland. Hawthorne had 3 rules he lived by. Never trust a station administrator who smiled too much, always check the seals on second-hand equipment twice, and never, under any circumstances, fix anything that made a whistling noise when it wasn't supposed to. These rules had served him reasonably well through 15 years of drifting between space stations and outposts along the frontier edge. At least until the day a vending machine tried to court him with a bouquet of synthesized protein bars and a small turquoise-skinned girl declared him her destined mentor. It began on loading dock 4 of Deep Space Station 7, the kind of place where rust was considered decorative and gravity was regulated with all the precision of a carnival ride. Ryland was waist-deep in the guts of a malfunctioning atmosphere recycler, a unit designed by a species known for valuing aesthetics over basic functionality. The thing resembled an iridescent sea urchin and fought back just as fiercely. "Come, on you overdesigned junk heap," Ryland muttered, elbow-deep in conduit lines. He twisted a coupling, heard a promising click followed by an ominous gurgle, and immediately regretted every decision that had led him to this moment. A blast of frigid condensation hit him square in the face. "You smell like disappointment and ozone," said a voice behind him, calm and oddly formal. Ryland turned, wiping frost from his beard, to see a child. Not a human child, of course. Her skin was turquoise, like the shallow seas of Terrace Prime. Her hair fell in thick, rope-like strands the color of a neutron star, and her eyes, all 3 of them, studied him with unnerving intensity. The central eye, vertical and slitted, like a cat's, seemed to look straight through him. She stood perhaps 4 feet tall and clutched what looked like an ancient data tablet to her chest. "I have observed you for 26 station cycles," she announced with the gravity of someone declaring war. "And I have concluded that you meet the minimal qualifying criteria." Ryland blinked, droplets still clinging to his eyelashes. "Minimal criteria for what exactly?" "For designation as my mentor bond," she replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. "I am Zephyra of the Luminous Tide. I am 9 standard cycles old. I will return when I am grown. You will wait." Somewhere in Ryland's brain, mental gears ground to a halt, slipped, then surrendered completely. "Wait, what? Kid? I am not a kid," she interrupted, her central eye narrowing dangerously. "I am of maturation classification, preliminary 1. My collective has deemed me ready for pathfinding. You are adequate." Adequate? Ryland had been called many things during his years hopping from station to station: irresponsible, occasionally brilliant, perpetually broke, questionably hygienic. But adequate was decidedly new territory. "Look, Zephyra, was it? This is really flattering, truly, but maybe wait until you've, hit puberty and learned what adequate actually means before you go around picking mentors." She considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Puberty, human, biological transition, irrelevant to my species. We mature through cognitive leaps, not hormonal floods. Then, with all the solemnity of someone concluding a peace treaty, she added, "I will study your forms of dismissal. I will study your patterns. I will return." With that, she turned sharply and walked away, each step precise and measured, like she'd just concluded a critical diplomatic mission, rather than thoroughly confused a frost-covered mechanic. Ryland stood frozen, then looked up at the station's pitted ceiling as if it might offer some explanation. It did not. Instead, a pipe overhead chose that precise moment to rupture, dousing him with a fresh spray of coolant. "Perfect," he muttered. "Just perfect." The encounter faded quickly, lost amid the chaos of station life. Zephyra vanished into the crowds of traders, diplomats, and creatures with questionable intentions and even more questionable anatomy. Ryland dried off, patched the recycler, poorly, and told himself that this was just one of those bizarre encounters that made life on the frontier edge so educational. Like the time he accidentally married a sentient lichen colony on Proxima Centauri IV. Days melted into weeks. Ryland got fired from the maintenance crew when his report on system inefficiencies included the phrase, runs about as reliably as a gambling addict's promises. He bounced between jobs, a stint recalibrating docking clamps, 2 fingers lost, temporarily, programming a therapy AI for mining crews. The AI developed existential dread, and once, memorably, filling in as a translator for a delegation of gelatinous life forms. His boots never recovered. Deep Space Station 7 remained unchanged, still a patchwork of scavenged tech and improvised solutions, still home to smugglers, refugees, and one particular vendor who claimed to sell authentic Earth cuisine but whose chicken suspiciously chirped when undercooked. Ryland survived mostly by being too stubborn to fail and too clever to get caught. Sometimes, though, during the quiet moments when he was alone, tinkering with a broken cleaning drone or teaching a security turret to play chess, he would remember her, Zafira, with her unnerving stare and absolute certainty. The kind of stare that didn't ask questions but made declarations about the universe. But life in the outer systems moved quickly. People passed through Deep Space Station 7 all the time, came and went with stories and scars and secrets. Ryland figured she was just another strange footnote in his increasingly bizarre life history. Then came the day the station lights flickered to darkness, just for a second. Long enough for every electronic system to hiccup, for gravity to stutter and drop everyone half an inch, for Ryland to look up from his current project, a beverage dispenser that claimed it wrote poetry when overheated, and mutter, "That's not supposed to happen." He stepped outside his makeshift workshop just in time to see a ship docking at the executive bay, not a common trader or supply vessel, sleek, silent, with lines that suggested it had been designed by someone who understood both aesthetics and the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself, the kind of ship that made other ships nervous. The ramp descended with a hydraulic whisper, and out walked a figure, turquoise skin, neutron star hair woven into an intricate pattern that might have been art or mathematics or both. 3 eyes, the central one still vertical, still intense, but now radiating a calm authority that made the station's security personnel straighten unconsciously. She moved like she owned not just the air around her but the very concept of movement itself. Ryland's brain performed an emergency reboot. "Zafira," he managed, his voice catching slightly. She smiled, a subtle expression that conveyed neither amusement nor warmth, but simple acknowledgement. "I have returned," she said. "I am grown." "Of course you have," he replied, suddenly aware of the oil stain on his jumpsuit and the protein bar wrapper stuck to his boot. "I also remember telling a coffee maker it had beautiful circuitry once. Memory is not always reliable." "My people," she said, stepping closer, "do not misremember promises." "I was joking." "I was not." Her 3 eyes studied him. "The universe has changed since our meeting, Ryland Hawthorne. The patterns you once mapped in the Drift Nebula are unraveling. Something ancient is waking, something that resonates with both your mind and mine. That is why I chose you." "I'm sorry, what?" Ryland ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "You're telling me you spent, how long has it been? 7 years? Training for what exactly? Because I made a sarcastic comment about waiting for you to grow up?" 7 years, 2 months, 14 days, she confirmed, "and I did not train." "Because of your comment. I trained because of what I saw in your resonance pattern, the same pattern that is now echoing across 3 sectors of space, calling to something that should have remained dormant." Somewhere behind them, the beverage dispenser beeped and ejected a cup of something that smelled suspiciously like fear and cinnamon. Ryland didn't run. Running would have required a plan, and planning required understanding what was happening, which he definitely did not. He managed to form half a sentence that died in his throat. Zafira regarded him with what might have been amusement, though her species wasn't known for expressing emotions in ways humans recognized easily. Maybe it was the slight tilt of her head, or the way she clasped her hands behind her back like a teacher about to administer a particularly challenging test. "The universe," she said simply, "has need of us both. Will you come with me, Ryland Hawthorne? Or shall I wait another 7 years for you to mature enough to accept your role in what is to come?" The beverage dispenser behind them hummed a melancholy tune and dispensed another cup. This one smelled like destiny and burnt coffee. The return and revelation. The ship Zephyra had arrived in was called Calculated Possibility, which Ryland found both somewhat pretentious and deeply unsettling. It was a mid-class diplomatic vessel with enough firepower hidden beneath its elegant curves to make a battlecruiser nervous. The interior was sparse, functional, with just enough aesthetic touches to remind visitors that its owner came from a civilization that had mastered interstellar travel when humans were still arguing over whether fire was a good idea. The ship's AI introduced itself as Nexus, and immediately informed Ryland that his biochemical signature indicated 3 suboptimal nutrient deficiencies. Your electrolyte balance suggests you've been consuming station-synthesized alcohol again, Nexus observed with digital disapproval. It's called coping, Ryland muttered, buckling into the co-pilot's seat. Where exactly are we headed? Zephyra activated the navigation system with a fluid gesture. A holographic display bloomed between them, showing a sector of space that pulsed with an irregular rhythm, like a heartbeat learning a new tempo. The coordinate cluster aligns with a pocket of resonant space in the Veil Nebula, she explained. It wasn't on any charts until 14 cycles ago. Now it registers as a Class 4 dimensional anomaly. That sounds delightfully ominous, Ryland said, studying the display. And you think this has something to do with my old scout missions? Not think. No. She tapped a sequence into the console. 12 years ago, you mapped gravitational inconsistencies in the Drift Nebula. Your readings contained a signature, frequency that matches what we're detecting now. Something you encountered has been ripening. As the ship disengaged from the station, Ryland watched his temporary home fade into the distance. His workshop, his half-finished projects, probably his security deposit. He sighed and turned back to the controls. Let's hope whatever's ripening comes with instructions and a reasonable return policy. The journey was quiet at first. Stars stretched past in lazy ribbons as Nexus guided them through a series of jump points. Ryland used the time to pretend he wasn't deeply concerned. He tinkered with a loose panel in the galley, humming tunelessly to mask his anxiety. Zephyra observed him in her distinctive way, silently, with all 3 eyes blinking at slightly different intervals, like she was recording him from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Why did you leave the exploration program? She asked finally, her central eye fixed on his hands as he worked. Ryland paused, then answered more honestly than he'd intended. I got tired of being told to discover things no one actually wanted found. She tilted her head. Explain. Explorations. Supposed to be about wonder, right? But all the major commissions were tied to resource assessments and military strategic points. Nobody wanted to know why the light bent strangely in the Perseus arm. They wanted to know if they could build a refueling station there without it exploding. He tightened a bolt with unnecessary force. Curiosity without profit margin is considered a liability. You sound bitter. Bitter? Blacklisted and banned from 3 scientific conferences. I'm consistent, at least. They fell silent again as the ship's sensors began registering unusual readings. Ahead of them, space itself seemed to bend slightly, like reality was folding at the edges. We're approaching the anomaly threshold, Zephyra announced, her fingers dancing across the controls. Nexus, activate psionic dampeners. Psionic what now? Ryland straightened in his seat. Dampeners engaged, Nexus replied. Recommend mental anchoring protocols. Memory distortion likely within anomaly field. Wait, what does that mean? Ryland tightened his harness. Are we about to have our brains scrambled? Anomalous space often reflects cognitive patterns, Zephyra explained without looking up from her console. If you begin experiencing temporal displacement or personality fragmentation, focus on something concrete, a simple equation or childhood memory. Oh, is that all? Ryland muttered. Great safety briefing. Really inspiring confidence here. The space ahead darkened, not with the absence of light but with an excess of reality. Shapes moved at the edges of perception. Geometric patterns that seemed to fold into themselves without ever quite resolving into anything recognizable. The ship shuddered, and suddenly the view screen wasn't showing empty space anymore. Instead, they were looking at themselves. A perfect mirror image of the calculated possibility floating opposite them, down to the smallest detail. Okay, Ryland said slowly. That's new. It is not physical, Zephyra replied, her central eye narrowing. It is a memory echo, a reflection of possibility. The view shifted, and inside the twin vessel they could see a younger Zephyra, perhaps 14 by human standards, practicing combat forms with fluid, deadly precision. Each movement flowed into the next with inhuman grace as she battled holographic opponents that moved too quickly for Ryland's eyes to track. Combat training, she said simply. Year 3 of my preparation. You trained in combat for me? For this. She gestured to the anomaly around them. For what we will face. The image shifted again, and now they were seeing Ryland in his scout ship from years ago, floating in a strange section of space where the stars seemed to pulse in synchronized patterns. His recorded voice came through tinny and distant. Scout, log day 42. Found something weird in Sector 7G, the voids. Singing, I think. Sending readings now. Also, anyone else smell butterscotch out here, or is my oxygen mix off again? Ryland winced. Why do I sound like I'm 12? You were experiencing initial resonance contact, Zephyra replied. Your mind was attempting to translate non-standard sensory input. Before Ryland could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The view screen surged with color and fractals of light. The calculated possibility lurched violently, throwing Ryland against his restraints. We are entering a memory fold, Nexus announced with entirely too much calm. Reality cohesion dropping to 60%. The view screen darkened, then flared, to life with another scene. The corridor from Ryland's recording. Hexagonal walls that pulsed with internal light, surfaces that seemed to breathe. One section definitely had what looked like an eye. Is that wall watching us? Ryland hissed, gripping his seat. Remain calm, Zephyra instructed, her hands flying over the controls. Don't engage emotionally. I am nothing but emotions right now. The ship bucked again as the corridor around them began to collapse inward, folding like a paper sculpture being crushed by an invisible hand. Voices echoed through the ship, fragments of old communications, laughter, screams. Ryland's own voice shouting over static. The patterns, they're in my head, they keep repeating, can anyone hear me? Zephyra reached into a compartment beside her seat and removed a small crystalline sphere that pulsed with gentle blue light. Resonance anchor, she explained, holding it between them. It stabilizes memory patterns in fluctuating reality. Great, Ryland said through gritted teeth. I prepared for this by learning how to cheat at cards and developing an impressive tolerance for synthetic whiskey. The corridor continued collapsing behind them, reality folding in on itself like a cosmic origami disaster. Ahead, a rift opened. Pure, white light laced with symbols that flashed too quickly to comprehend. That's our exit, Zephyra announced, pushing the ship's engines to maximum. Hold on. They surged forward through the light, the voices and visions fading as they passed through the rift. Everything went silent for one perfect, peaceful moment, then stabilized. The ship floated in a calm pocket of space, surrounded by stars that behaved exactly as stars should. Ryland released his white-knuckled grip on the armrests. Okay, that was extremely unpleasant. We've passed the first barrier, Zephyra said, her three eyes scanning the readouts. The resonance is stronger here. How many more of these fun little reality hiccups do we have to look forward to? Ain glanced at him. Several. He groaned and slumped in his seat. Next time I'm befriending someone who doesn't use quantum mechanics as a conversation starter. Nexus chimed in helpfully, statistically unlikely given your personality profile. They continued deeper into the anomaly zone, each barrier revealing more fragments of both their pasts, Zephyra's rigorous training, Ryland's scattered explorations. The patterns began to clarify. Both of them had encountered the same phenomenon years apart. Both had been marked by it, their minds resonating on frequencies that called to whatever ancient intelligence lived within the fold of space. After passing, Through the fifth barrier, they emerged into a vast pocket of calm. At its center floated what could only be described as a library, if libraries were alive, conscious, and built from crystalline structures that reassembled themselves continuously. The archive, Zephyra whispered, something like reverence in her voice. The repository of all significant memory patterns in this sector. It looks like someone built a cathedral out of mirror shards and gave it anxiety, Ryland observed. Does it know we're here? As if in answer, a beam of light extended from the archive's central spire, scanning their ship. A voice filled the cabin, not spoken, but somehow felt, as if the words were being assembled directly in their minds. The resonance pair has arrived, it said. The closed loop seeks resolution. Zephyra nodded, as if this made perfect sense. We seek understanding of the pattern that connects us. Understanding requires integration, the archive replied. You carry fragments, they must be made whole. Ryland cleared his throat. Is anyone else deeply confused, or is it just me? 12 years ago, Zephyra explained, turning to him. You mapped a fold in space that contained a fragment of the archive's memory. That fragment attached itself to your neural patterns, like a cosmic hitchhiker. When I met you as a child, I recognized the pattern. My species is naturally attuned to such things. So you... what? Spent 7 years training to come back and help me get this thing out of my head. Not exactly. For the first time, Zephyra looked uncertain. The fragment isn't just in your head. It's becoming part of the fabric of reality around us. The anomalies spreading through this sector are echoes of what you encountered. If left unchecked, they could destabilize entire star systems. And I'm guessing unchecked is bad? Catastrophic, she confirmed. The archive needs both of us to stabilize the pattern. Your human adaptability and my species' natural resonance abilities. The archive's voice returned, patient but insistent. You must enter the integration chamber. Together. A docking bay appeared on the archive's surface, opening like a flower made of light and crystal. Nexus guided the ship toward it with perfect precision. As they prepared to disembark, Ryland paused, looking at Zephyra with new understanding. You knew all this when you were 9? That's why you chose me as your mentor? I knew something of significance connected us, she admitted. The full pattern only became clear as I trained and grew. My people believe in preparation and patience. Some journeys cannot be rushed. Ryland nodded slowly. And here I thought you were just a weird kid with boundary issues. For the first time, Zephyra smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her alien features into something surprisingly warm. I was also that. They stepped off the ship together, into the heart of the archive, ready to face whatever came next. Not as mentor and student, but as equals bound by a cosmic pattern neither had asked for, but both were now responsible for. Resolving. The integration chamber awaited, its walls reflecting infinite possibilities and the promise of understanding. Whatever happened next would change them both forever.